let me call on Asha now just to introduce Ashwin.
Yeah. So, how many writers in the house? Content creators, bloggers? Raise your hands. Hey, I'm one. That's it? No more writers in the house? How many aspiring writers in the house?
I think even if you tweet, you're a writer today, right? As Arun Prabhudesai will say. Right, Arun? If you
Spotlight on Arun.
If you can write 140 characters of coherence.
Mohul, I've kept a seat for you here. Come off it. I've taken out printouts reserved for Mohul. Please sit next to Arun.
Mohul has come right out of...
So, Mohul has come all the way from Delhi.
From
because
Tihar.
He wants to,
but I need my own adapter.
He's come from Tihar jail, mind you, right? That's Mohul Ghosh from Tihar jail.
Okay. How many of you have written a book or want to write a book?
Yay!
Really, lots of us. How many of you can figure out how to find a publisher?
Can or cannot?
Cannot.
Cannot.
Oh, okay. Right. How many of you are fans of Ashwin?
Ashwin, take a look, man. We're asking people how many of us don't like you, and they're all putting up their hands, right?
Okay, now tell me his books, quickly. Yes, one with James Patterson. Yes, absolutely. Chanakya Chand.
50 bloody
and
good
his
luck.
first one, Rosabelle Line.
30?
Yeah? Okay.
And the bloody good luck one.
Yes, and his last book, his most recent book, 13 Steps to Bloody Good Luck, brought us a lot of good luck. We ran a good luck contest on TheRodinhoods. We got about 39 stories, good luck stories, which is great for us for the simple reason that we got a lot of people to write. Hello. We got a lot of people to write who never wrote on TheRodinhoods before. So, and because of this contest, one fine day I called Ashwin up and I said, are you in town on March 28th and would you be interested to do a session on entrepreneurship? And in a heartbeat, in 10 seconds flat, he checked his calendar and he said, I'll be happy. So, I need one.
So, Asha, I want to speak a couple of lines on Ashwin Sanghi, right? The Ashwin Sanghi.
Okay.
So let me introduce when I met this man first. I was 15. I think you were 13. No, just kidding.
Yeah,
you were 15.
Must have been 10. I must have been 10.
We grew up in a very different world, right? This is a vintage world in the 80s when none of you guys were even born. And we had this extempore contest that I think the Rotary Club was running. This was at the Homi Bhava. Do you remember?
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. Now the challenge in these things is, right? Extempore is, how many people have taken part in an extempore competition? Awesome. So you don't know what you're going to speak on till the last minute, right? And beyond that, there was another big challenge.
That mine or?
The challenge was there were two major enemy camps, right? So I'm from Campion School in Colaba, and this bugger is from Cathedral. And the problem when we saw the Cathedral camp, we were so freaked out. And lo and behold, this man delivered the best extempore speech. So I knew something was going on. Nevertheless, so that was one faint memory.
Yeah.
And then the second memory, which I will reveal, unfortunately, whether you like it or not, are his house parties that he has. And those are gorgeous Beverly Hills type house parties in his
Come on, for heaven's sake.
Which you may be invited to if you're
I'm just a poor lekhak.
Can I also introduce you to, can I also just speak a little bit of the family and what the background, because
sure.
It's going to come up.
Sure.
So, may I just say, how many of you all have experienced a Maruti car, or bought a Maruti car, or sold a Maruti car, right? In all probability, you've made this man richer. So, the Sanghi family was the first family that pretty much, was the first sales front for Maruti in India with Vitesse, if you remember. And the reason I bring these things up is there is a context to why I will reveal that when we speak.
Yeah,
but
certainly.
there's a background, right? So awesome.
Cool.
Proud of you.
Thanks, Alok.
A big honor to present to you Ashwin Sanghi, New York Times best-selling author, also included in the Forbes India Celebrity 100 with a lot of awards.
Thank you, Asha. Now, unfortunately, you've set the expectation bar right there. And I'm more excited about the fact, Alok, that your parents are right here in the front row. What could be a better audience? So I'm delighted to be here because I've heard so much about the Rodinhoods. And as Alok mentioned, we go back a long way. Since time is short and the presentation is relatively long, let me just quickly launch into it. So I'm here to talk to you about authorpreneurship, if there is such a word. Asha, does the word exist actually? Is it there in the dictionary? Does it there? Is it there? Well, anyway, the first I heard of this word was actually the Economist article. Yeah. So anyway, let's get down to it. Let me start by telling you a story. Yeah. And because at the end of the day, I'm a storyteller, right? So and every story has to start with once upon a time. So we'll start with once upon a time. So once upon a time, there was a lawyer in Mississippi. And he was in a courtroom one day, and he saw this little girl, a 12-year-old, and she was narrating to the jury about how she had been raped and beaten. And this lawyer was extremely moved. And it moved him to the point where he decided to write a story. Now, this is the man who ended up writing that story. Can anyone recognize this person? Lovely. Thank you. John Grisham. That story, that first story, was known as A Time to Kill. And of course, when John Grisham wrote that story, he was rejected 28 times. 28 publishers said, this book won't work. The first publisher that he landed up with was a small press known as Winwood Press. Most of you would not have heard of that press. And the first print run was about 5,000 copies. Now, please keep this in perspective that John Grisham then went on to sell 250 million books, starting with that first print run. Now, let me now, having given you that little glimmer of hope for the would-be authors in this crowd, let me now take you to the reality. You know, there is an old proverb, I think it's Somerset Maugham who said this, that there are 3 rules for writing a novel. Unfortunately, no one knows what they are. And that was, honestly speaking, my situation. I knew nothing. When I started writing that first book of mine, which was in 2003, I came from a background which was very similar to Alok's, a Marwadi Banya background. The only thing I had been trained for was a world of business. So my training was in business, not in writing. I hadn't done English literature, creative writing, any of that. And you know, when I was a kid, I used to go to my dad's office. And there was a Munimji, he used to wear this cap. And he used to say, bookkeeping is more relevant than book reading. So if you really want to get ahead in life, focus on that. And of course, he had another zinger to offer Alok. He said, if you must read, then read a balance sheet. Yeah? So that was pretty much the cultural context. So, but then one day, when I was doing pretty well in business, in fact, a dear friend of mine, a school friend, he reminded me, he said, you know, Ashwin, the problem with winning that rat race that you are running is that you're still a rat. And he asked me that question. He said, do you want to be a rat for the rest of your life? And the internal answer was, no, I don't want to be just another chuha, you know. And so my grandfather, my Nanaji, he was a person who told me, he said, the only thing that money gives you is the freedom of not having to worry about money. And he would say that, listen, Lakshmi without Saraswati, no use. Only when Lakshmi and Saraswati sit together can you prosper. Like Ganesha, which probably explains my physique. So, like Ganesha. Ganesha in that sense is the original connector. The connector of Lakshmi and Saraswati, the connector of wealth and knowledge, the connector of money and passion. So, my writing effort started from that time, after that conversation. So, can anyone recognize this person? Yeah, thank you. I heard that somewhere or the other. I heard that. Samuel Johnson. And Samuel Johnson, of course, there is something which is known as the Samuel Johnson treatment. Any idea what that is? Well, a young aspiring author sent his manuscript to Samuel Johnson, and Samuel Johnson said, your manuscript is good and original, but the part that's good isn't original, and the part that's original isn't too good. And that was pretty much the situation I was dealing with. I had written a first book, but no one seemed to like it. I used to have this entire chart in front of me where I used to compare the number of rejections that people had received. So that first book, the Harry Potter series, had been rejected 12 times. In fact, someone went to the extent of telling J.K. Rowling, please don't give up your day job. And then there was Jonathan Livingston Seagull, 18 times. And then Stephen King. If there was a thriller writer, it's Stephen King, 30 times, that first novel. Chicken Soup for the Soul, 33 times. Gone with the Wind. I mean, if there is a classic, it's Gone with the Wind, right? 38 times. And then topping the list, yours truly, 47 times. So, you know, lots of rejections. But I must tell you, it was ironic. I was almost proud. You know, I am ahead of these guys. That I am ahead of J.K. Rowling and Stephen King. So I think it goes back to the Mark Cuban idea that every no brings me closer to a yes. And if you can keep that in your mind, then the rejections actually, you see it as progress. So when I was sitting with a friend of mine who in those days used to work for Random House, he said, you know, Ashwin, the publishing industry is notorious for any lack of agreement. You bring two publishers into the same room, they'll have completely opposing views on most subjects. But they seem to be surprisingly unanimous regarding you. You're unpublishable. And so, having now given you a little bit of a background about myself, let me give you some facts to ponder over. Google estimates that the total number of unique books in the world is 129 million. Around 2.2 million titles are added each year to the universe of books. Around 82,000 titles are released in India each year. That's about 225 titles every day. Almost a title every hour. 10 titles every hour. Of this, 21,000 titles are in English. And what's really remarkable is the fact that only 2% of these will make it into the bookstore shelves. Only 2%. Because the average number of titles that a crossword or a landmark stores is less than about 1,500, which includes the entire backlist. So, scary statistic. The average self-published book, if you decide to go self-publishing route, the average self-published book will sell 57 copies during its lifetime. Just think about this. 57 copies during its lifetime is what the average book, the average self-published book will sell. And I can bet you it will be mostly to the author, his friends, his family. Yeah? 950,000 titles out of the 1.2 million titles that are tracked by Nielsen, they sell less than 99 copies. In the year, sell less than 99 copies in the year. Another 200,000 will sell less than 1,000 copies. Only 25,000 will sell more than 5,000 copies. So the statistics are bloody scary. The average shopper in a bookstore will spend 8 seconds on the front cover of your book, 15 seconds on the back cover, and in that time, he will decide whether he will pick up the book from the shelf and take it to the cash register or not. Scarier statistic, most readers do not get past page 18 of the average book. So, all of this in perspective, I decided to self-publish because there was no one who was willing to publish me. At that point of time, there were various models available. One was the subsidy model, where you decided to subsidize a part of the printing cost. There was a vanity model where you tied up with a vanity press and you took over the entire marketing and distribution costs. There was the self-publishing model where you decided to become your own publisher without partnering with anyone. And finally, there was a print-on-demand model, which allowed the partner to produce one book at a time. So when an order came in from Amazon, one book would be printed and sent out. I went in for that last option, which was print-on-demand, with that first book. So that's the cover of my first book. And by the way, the cover is designed by me. Because at that point of time, it was all do-it-yourself. And Ashwin Sanghi became Sean Higgins because that first book was written under my pseudonym. Sean Higgins, by the way, is simply an anagram of Ashwin Sanghi. So that's how that first book was published. Now, our dear friend, Mr. Hemingway, has said, write when drunk and edit when sober. I want to today slightly make a modification on that. The modification is write, edit, or both when drunk, but remember the hangover the next morning, that's known as book marketing. Everyone thinks that the difficult bit is writing a book. It isn't writing a book. It's getting that book to be sold. Why would you invest 2 years writing a book if you're simply going to have no one read it? Typical bookstore. I'm just wondering, where is my title here? I can't find it. I'm looking everywhere. I can't find the goddamn title. Where the hell is my book? And this is the biggest problem in the book industry. Discoverability. How do you discover a title? Whether it's in a bookstore, whether it's online. So I started out by doing my own marketing. And for a self-published author who has limited resources, I would send out emails to those who I knew saying, listen, you know, this is the link on Amazon. Will you please go and do me a big favor by buying this book? And then I created a 1-minute YouTube commercial. Again, only on iMovie, no additional budgets. So on iMovie, and then I put it up on YouTube and started garnering some views. Twitter, I created my Twitter handle. That's the time I created it. Facebook, started posting and also started getting some amount of traction. Contests, I would say that, hey, listen, today at the end of the day, I'm going to give out one book to someone who asks me a great question on Twitter. Unfortunately, not many questions were forthcoming. Media, press, they refused to interview or to speak to someone who was a self-published author. Most of them turned around and said, listen, we don't review self-published books. So I would reach out to about 5 bloggers every day who wrote about books. And I would say, listen, I'll send you a free copy. Just write about it. I don't care whether you like it or don't like it. Just write. Because you don't mind being loved or hated. You don't want to be ignored. And that's pretty much what my situation was. I had extracts. I would give away 5-page, 10-page extracts online on things like SlideShare and Scribd. I would join discussion groups, sometimes anonymously, in order to say, oh, that's a great book. Have you read this book by Ashwin Sanghi? I had a website where I would do lots of SEO sort of stuff in order to make sure that the results were up there. Started using AdWords at a later stage. And then, of course, anyone who said that the book was good, I would say, listen, can you please go to Amazon and write a review? Media and PR, honestly, tried a lot, but didn't work during the self-publishing days. So cover design, you saw what the results were. So not much to write home about. So let me tell you another story, another once upon a time. And this is actually my own story, really. I started out by picking up a book called Self-Publishing for Dummies. Then I eventually tied up with this self-publishing outfit, which had just started in 2007 called Lulu. So Lulu would allow me to actually do print on demand. Then that resulted in that first book getting published. But the problem was that the book wasn't available in Indian bookstores. So I went to Crossword and I said, listen, will you please stock my book for me? They said, we only deal with distributors. So you'll need to get yourself a distributor. So I went to a bunch of distributors. Most of them didn't even bother to reply back to me. But eventually, one of the distributors, UBSPD, did get back. And UBSPD at that time had a guy called Vivek Ahuja running it. And Vivek was really decent. He said, Ashwin, you know, you'll have to approach more than one distributor. So he sent me a list of about 100 distributors. And he said, why don't you write to them along with a copy of your book? Maybe one of them will click. And that's what resulted in my writing to a bunch of distributors. One of the distributors is a Chennai-based company called East West. And East West eventually got back to me. East West at that time had just set up a chain of bookstores known as Landmark. And Landmark, the founder of Landmark was a lady called Hemu Ramaiah. And Hemu got in touch with me and she said, Ashwin, that's a fantastic book. Why haven't you been published? I said, well, the problem is that there's no publisher left to approach. So she said, no, I think there's a great opportunity here. She put me in touch with my current publisher, a guy called Gautam. And Gautam, in turn, eventually ended up publishing me under the title of Westland, which is my current publishing outfit. So that's my story. So 2007, I self-published this book. That eventually results in 2008, the book being published by Westland in India. Goes on to become a bestseller. 2010, I published Chanakya's Chant. 2012, The Krishna Key. And then, of course, 2015, I tie up with James Patterson for Private India. And then, of course, very recently, the book that you guys are familiar with, 13 Steps to Bloody Good Luck. So the interesting thing is that now I've crossed 1 million books. So with that, of course, that number is still very small in comparison to John Grisham's 250 million, but hopefully I'll get there someday. So I want to tell you what is the reality check on earnings of an author. It's very important because many people just think that, oh, this will just happen, you know. The average book, as we rightly sort of saw right now, is about 1,000 odd units. 1,000 units, assuming that the price is about 200 rupees per book. That means your annual turnover is about 2 lakhs. And if the author royalty is at around 10%, you're going to make 20,000 in the year. Certainly not enough to run your home. And on the other hand, even if you're doing really well, which means, in other words, you've crossed that 50,000 mark, even at that 50,000 mark, what you're looking at is probably something like about 10 lakhs a year. And mind you, the number of authors in India who actually cross that 50,000 mark on a title is probably less than 20. So keep that perspective in mind, please. So the truth is that most writers can write books faster than publishers can write their checks. And, well, so I took you through the marketing for a self-published author. What happens when you get published? Well, when you get published, you can start looking at things like print ads. The electronic media opens up. Nowadays, we've seen that for certain types of books, there have been actually ads that have been running even in the movie theaters. Launch events become a little more jazzy, snazzy. You can spend a little more money. In-store visibility. I remember when I had just started out as an author, I went into a crossword. This was in 2009. Rosabal Line had just come out. I saw exactly 3 copies of that book sitting in one musty, dusty shelf somewhere at the back of the store in crossword Kemp's Corner. And I'm not ashamed to say, I picked up the 3 books, took out my kerchief, dusted them, brought them to the bestseller rack and left them there. And, well, you know, one of the old salespeople at Westland, he told me, he said, Sanghi ji, aap ek cheez yaad rakhiye. Jo bikta hai, wo pehle dikhta hai. So, agar dikhta nahi hai, to wo bikta nahi hai. So, the visibility factor is a critical element. So, I became a little more shameless about these things. Non-traditional retail. Today, for example, increasingly we are finding that books are even being sold at places that you would not imagine to find a book. Supermarkets, for example. Music tracks. For example, Chanakya's Chant, I actually created a music track and made it available freely downloadable as an MP3 because I ended up getting a large number of people who would download the track and become familiar with the book. Cross promotions. E-formats. Today, for example, it's not just about Kindle or using any other format, but today you have things like Maxter, NewsHunt, and so many other companies which have come up. So these are all ways. Writing newspaper columns, that becomes an option open. TV series and movies. Today, the Krishna Key is now becoming a TV series, and Chanakya's Chant, if all goes well, will become a movie one day. So that again gives you a wider reach. And then, of course, something close to Alok's heart, gaming. That's increasingly happening with books turning into, So it's all a question of being able to sell the story. It doesn't matter what format you sell it in. So remember one thing, it's a myth that good books sell by themselves. I mean, here you have an ad. This ad actually goes back to 1477. 1477, printed by William Caxton. It's a manual for priests, and he describes the book and then states that you can get a copy at the Red Pale, which was the name of his bookshop in Westminster. And you will not be disappointed because the book is good and cheap. Books have always been marketed. Scott Fitzgerald did it with The Great Gatsby. Winnie the Pooh, 1926 this ad appeared. Ernest Hemingway. So here you see James Patterson, the guy I partnered with for Private India. And, okay, by the way, Private India is up for the Crossword Popular Book Choice Award. So this is what is known as a commercial break. So please vote. So going back to James Patterson, 300 million books sold. And last year, his earnings were $90 million US, just from the books that he had sold. So he's a perfect case study in marketing. Take, for example, the book which came out after Private India, Private Vegas. Private Vegas was launched just January, 2 months ago. And you know what? The first 1,000 readers, a limited number of 1,000 readers, were allowed to download a copy of the book, which would self-destruct in 24 hours. 24 hours. So that it was for hardcore fans to pick up the book. And then one print copy, the first single print copy, was sold in a bidding war for $300,000. The book, what it got you was the book, A Weekend in a Fancy Hotel, Dinner with James Patterson, and the chance to win the physical book actually explode in an undisclosed location accompanied by a SWAT team. Now, if that isn't marketing, I don't know what is. The 7-year bitch, Jennifer Bell, she found that her publisher's publicity department sucked, wasn't doing anything. So what does this lady do? She hires a bunch of actresses at $8 per hour to laugh publicly while reading her book on the New York subway system. And 600 actresses actually applied for that role. The stunt got her national coverage. Mission accomplished. So, this book, I mean, everyone's familiar with it, right? But what is important to note again is that no one knew who Robert Galbraith was. Who was Robert Galbraith? But this sold only 1,500 copies while Robert Galbraith was on the cover. It was only when J.K. Rowling came forward and said, I'm Robert Galbraith, that suddenly the sales zoomed through the roof. Wonderful publicity stunt. No one wants to talk about it, but it was a wonderful, wonderfully choreographed publicity scheme. Thomas Harris with the Hannibal. When the book just got launched, he asked bookstores to serve up broad beans and Chianti, which is, of course, in the movie, which he eats with a piece of the victim's brain. So he got bookstores to do that. And then, of course, Timothy Ferriss is probably someone that you all have heard of. He wrote 3 books, The 4-Hour Work Week, The 4-Hour Body, and The 4-Hour Chef. And these were all self-published titles. Started out as a self-published title, and then becomes a #1 New York Times bestseller, and a #1 Wall Street Journal bestseller, and a USA Today bestseller. The next books also do equally well. So, in Japan, for example, you have what are called cell phone novels. Yeah, and cell phone novels are doing brilliantly, apparently. I mean, the chapter consists of about less than 100 words, and you get it in the form of a SMS on a daily basis. So it's like your Saas Bahu serial being served up to you in little installments. And the biggest cell phone novel site carries more than 1 million titles. There is this author called Mika who has been downloaded 12 million times. And in fact, the cell phone novel is now being made into a movie. 5 out of the 10 best-selling novels are cell phone novels. So what I'm trying to say is that nowadays the format, the medium doesn't seem to matter much. There is this new website called Wattpad, which allows people to actually write and completely bypass the publishing system. 40 million visitors per month, and recently raised almost about $46 million. So let me bust a few publishing myths and then I'll wind up for today. Good books sell by themselves. I hope I've made that abundantly clear. They don't. Then, critics' reviews sell books. Nonsense. When Chanakya's chant came out, the first review I got was that this is a book which has the intellectual caliber of Winnie the Pooh. And when the Rosabah line came out, one of the first critical reviews was, Ashwin Sanghi writes well. I wish his book had been a little shorter and had stopped on, say, page 10. That was the first review. And you know, surprisingly, what happened with the Chanakya's chant thing, the first review that came out was in the Hindu, and it was a scathing review. Terrible. I wanted to almost go back into bed. And the next day, my sales went up. That whole quarter, the sales in the South actually went up. So there is really very little correlation there. Writing is about inspiration, not perspiration. Nonsense. It's a craft, much more than an art. So you need to go through the process. You know, who was it who said that easy reading is damn hard writing? And that applies in whatever you do. Don't judge a book by its cover. Oh, for heaven's sake, who came up with that one? The book cover is critical because you only have 8 seconds in the bookstore to catch someone's attention. The author's job is to write and publisher's is to sell. Ha, ha, ha. There is no publisher I know of who actually sells your book. The only books that actually sell are the ones where the author gets involved. You can make a living from being a successful author. What is a successful author? Someone who sells more than 10,000 books. Can you make a living from that? No way. You can't make a living from being an author. That's also nonsense. You can, but it's a long, long trek to get there. For the first 6 or 7 years, there was no way that I could have functioned on my royalties alone. Today I can. The genre of writing is unimportant. No, it is. It is very important because at the end of the day, if you look at Indian market, then you have, for example, genres like mythology. You have genres like chick lit. You have campus romance, which are doing exceedingly well. The same situation is not repeated, for example, in the US or the UK, where it is predominantly crime and mystery, which does exceedingly well. So the genre in which you are writing is undoubtedly important. Pricing is unimportant. We are in a very, very price-sensitive market. So whether you price a book at 200 or whether you price it at 150, it's exceedingly important in terms of your eventual volumes. Good authors are not concerned about sales volumes. That's an old myth. Every author wants his book to sell. And the ones who say that they don't, they're simply lying to your face. Bestseller lists are unimportant? No, they are. They are, because they send out a message to the bookstore owners as to whether a book is worth stocking or not. So it's a very, very strong psychological impact. Bestseller lists are important. Well, it depends on the bestseller list. There are some bestseller lists in, for example, let me not take names, but there are, for example, certain bestseller lists which are developed on the basis of a survey done in exactly one bookstore. On the other hand, the Nielsen, for example, surveys about 4,000 stores. Bestseller lists can be manipulated, and bestseller lists cannot be manipulated. Both are myths. In some cases, you can manipulate them. In the US, there was a scandal recently where one particular author was found buying up his own books in order to make sure that he was in the bestseller list. So everything is possible. So let me end with this conversation that I had. After all of this, my father used to have this wonderful Punjabi gentleman with whom he used to enjoy a drink once in a while. And he was very fond of his Patiala pegs. So one day when I had been rejected by 47 publishers, I said, Uncle, you know, nothing seems to be working. My life is completely sort of, you know, finished. And he said, you know, remember, son, in life, 99% is simply about good luck. And I asked him, but uncle, what about the remaining 1%? 1% must be talent, hard work, something or the other. So he raised his glass, which was still half full. And he says, oh, that's known as bloody good luck. And so that 1%, I wish each one of you bloody good luck in your journey as authors. So, yeah. Cool. I'm sorry, I slightly overran. Okay, lovely.
I think he's standing for a while. He's
Next,
you
we'll have
were about
the...
to say, and he's.
And he's like half
And he's.
awesome.
Thank you. Thank you. We can
We'll
start.
have the key chat with Ashwin and Alok now.
So that was awesome, Ashwin.
Thanks, Alok.
As Rajan Mehra is here, and you know, we were just remembering the Chanakya chant inauguration at Blue Frog.
Yeah.
You remember? And there
Yeah,
was,
of
you know, I
course.
used to drink at that time, so I was very, very happy. And the tune definitely got my attention. I never read the book.
Yeah.
But I was witness to one of your marketing plots. And Rajan said, "Tu aisa kab karega?" So that was before I took his money and blew it up. So that was a nice inflection point for me. So, you know, really great. And I think you've done pretty much all the explaining. But my job here is to intersect. My job is here to kind of infer and inquire.
Yeah.
So, you know, let me throw back some challenges. Let me give you a small example of marketing at work. So, I got this book, 13
Steps to bloody good luck.
13 Steps to Bloody Good Luck, in my office about 4 months back.
Yeah.
5 months back?
Yeah, about 3 months.
3 months back. Now, listen, I'm making a very candid confession. Book aa gayi, desk par tha, Ashwin Sanghi ka naam tha. There are these fanboys in my office who love this man. And I kind of do favors to them by giving
No
them...
fangirls, is it?
No, fan guys.
Okay.
So
Only fanboys.
This guy saw he's a product manager. He saw Ashwin Sanghi's name and then he turned the cover. It had your name in it.
Yeah.
It had a signature in it. So this guy went into some kind of, you know, trip. And he said, you know him? I said, dude, le yaar, tu le. You know? A book to de di, padha bhi nahi. I didn't go beyond cover.
Yeah, understood.
So,
But you were worse than the average page 18.
now, unfortunately, I got a mail from Ashwin Sanghi after a week or 10 days saying, how did you like the book? I'm a liar, yaar. हम तो बेचू आदमी है, तो झूठ बोलते हैं बेचने के लिए. तो मैं कहा, very good. So he said, what did you like about the book? Now I was in a bit of a trap. I said, yaar, अब क्या बताऊं? I'm not going to get the bloody book to read. It's bloody book, bloody good luck.
Yeah.
So I gave some rambling answer. He said, you have not read the book. I said, dude, don't grill me. He says, because you're in the book. And that's when I got a shock. And I said, oh my God. So I told this product manager, "Sale, tu wapas book la pehle to." Now he had boasted about it and told his friends. So he had to scramble and get the book. And there and behold, there was a story I'd written which Ashwin had featured as part of a good luck story. So it is incredible. The whole experience of you know, bringing me back was phenomenal. So I saw
But
that.
I genuinely, I love that particular story of yours.
Thank you.
I mean, for those uninitiated into that, it was the story of you trying to do your ONGC deal.
That's right.
And I love that because I was wanting to talk about how networks and relationships happen in the world of good luck.
Right.
My entire life has been a great good luck story. I mean, I don't think that today, if I had to attribute that, was it hard work, was it perseverance, was it the fact that I was willing to take lots and lots of rejections? All of that is to one side, but ultimately, it's a lot of good luck. And those who you know, say that it isn't, they're just kidding themselves.
Right. So, you know, let's take it from there, right? And I still feel that the industry, and now I'm going to play Hannibal and Cannibal.
Yep.
That's my job here, you know. I just feel that this is it's a stupid industry.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's stuck in some vintage ad world that, you know.
Yeah, of
and
course.
And here's the question, Ashwin. why does a book have a price?
Oh, well, because, you know, I mean, luckily I'm not at a lit fest. Otherwise, I would get lynched for giving this answer. But a book is a product.
So let me
a
bring.
book is a product.
So let me bring some metaphors to life, right? I think for those who walked in late, he was talking about how there are 229 million books. 129 books on Google, and I think how many sell a year?
2.2 million get launched every year.
2.2 get launched every year. And how many things sell a year? Overall book sale.
Well, the overall book sale at the end, I mean, the numbers are staggeringly scary because you only have about 25,000 books.
That's right.
Which will actually cross that 1,000 mark.
Awesome. So
scary.
So the funnel looks, for all of us who are in marketing and product, and now we're talking real dhanda over here, the funnel looks really, really stupid. You got 229 at the top of the funnel, big broad funnel like an ocean, and you got this small, pipe going right down, which is giving you nothing.
Yep.
So here's the analogy, right? There are only 1.5 million games only on the App Store.
Correct.
On Android, and they're pretty much the same on the iOS store. There are about 3 billion mobile phone handsets out there.
Yeah.
And each of them download a game 6 times a year.
Incredible.
So with that funnel, look at the funnel I'm creating. I'm reversing the funnel.
Yeah,
the
absolutely.
supply is only 1.5.
Yes.
The audience is humongous, and I think about 10,000 games launch a day.
Yeah.
Tim Cook. Does everybody here know who Tim Cook is? If you don't know, get out of the room. Right. Okay. Everybody raise their hand on who's Tim Cook. So Tim Cook is the living CEO of Apple. Right. And Tim Cook said something very interesting in his first keynote after Mr. Jobs had died. Steve Jobs had died. And nobody heard that keynote because everybody thought he was stupid. But he said one line, just one line. That was the most incredible line I've ever heard. He said, every app on the iTunes store gets downloaded at least once in a month. So, the discoverability that you talked about is being solved and served by people like app stores, which are creating this kind of phenomenal unfriction to get discovered. But Ashwin, hold on. The bottom, the DNA that is running between this entire discussion is, and let me ask you a question. If your book was free, how much more would you have sold?
Okay. Let me just tell you something, that there are a bunch of books which are free on most of these sites. For example, you go to Amazon.com. When you look at Kindle books, you'll probably find at least a good 20 or 25,000 titles which are free. Right. And many of them are classics, which are very much worth reading.
Right. Merchant of Venice, for example.
Merchant of Venice, a lot of books by, for example, Leo Tolstoy, Dickens, all of that is available free. But do they get downloaded? Very, very minuscule numbers of downloads. The problem we have is the long tail.
Got it.
That we have a ton of books out there on the long tail, but there is no way of being able to actually discover them. It was Mark Twain who said that a classic is a book that everyone praises, but no one reads.
Perfect.
And that's genuinely the problem with a large chunk of books out there.
So let's get a show of hands. Right? How many people logged on to Facebook today? Today, man, like check Facebook today. Am I living in a lie? Okay. How many people check Twitter today? Okay. Google, something to do with search, some crap, some search. Don't tell me. I'm not going to ask how many people bought from Flipkart today. That's not a question I want to go next to. How many people WhatsApp today? Yeah, now we're talking. How many people actually read the physical newspaper today? Physical newspaper. So, बुड्ढे लोग हैं, अभी भी पढ़ रहे हैं newspaper. Right. How many people read a magazine in this week? A physical magazine. Can you see the hands? Like it's thinning. How many people read a book in the last 1 month? Wow.
Not bad.
Not bad.
Not
I think
bad.
that they're just honoring you, Ashwin.
I think you deserve an applause here.
How many people, so those who put up their hands, I'm going to ask the question again, but those of you who are under 25 only put up your hands. How many people read a book who are under 25? Thinner. Awesome. So who cares, man? Do people want to read books?
I think the number of people who want to read books is actually growing. And we are seeing that in India also. The problem is, I think the biggest issue besides discoverability is the issue of distribution. And that is unfortunately a huge issue, because in the average bookstore, only about 1,000 or 1,500 titles are actually going to be kept. The vast majority of books don't even make it to the bookstore. The other problem is that a large number of young, fresh talent authors, they are given an entire spiel on how they can market their book, not realizing that most of that stuff is very theoretical, not really practical. Sure. So for example, I mean, the other day a young author came up to me and said that, I wrote my first book, and unfortunately all the reviews on Amazon are terrible, 1 star and 2 stars. And so I said, but how does that matter? So, because ultimately at the end of the day, word of mouth
Sure.
is important. What a lot of people don't realize is that, I can't remember, at some lit fest, someone asked me, that you were panned by all the critics initially. Everyone said that, I mean, why are you even bothering to write? And I said, please understand that the relationship between an author and a critic is the same as the relationship between the lamppost and the dog. And so no matter what happens, that dog is eventually going to go to the lamppost and pee. So he is doing his job. He is doing his job as a critic in terms of making sure that his readers find something interesting to read. You need to do your job, which is in terms of saying, listen, I don't care. And I think one person who is panned a lot and really deserves a certain amount of credit is good old Chetan Bhagat.
Sure.
Let's
not go there. I
think
we're the Rodinhoods, and we have a little bit of self-respect left.
But the point I'm making is, Alok, that what I have at least found is that sometimes what really is needed to become a best-selling author is simply having a very, very, very thick skin.
Okay, so let's flip it again, right? And I'm going to keep going. Asha, you'll have to shout at me for time. Awesome. Yeah. So let's look at it again very practically. And I'm trained in the business of consumption of content.
Yes.
And we go where people want to go.
Yes.
So don't answer this question. What's the best-selling book in the world? Anybody? How many million copies? Probably 1 billion. What's the second best-selling book in the world? No, don't. Anybody knows? Sir?
No.
I think it's just 7 ways to influence friends and...
Dale Carnegie, is it?
Dale Carnegie. One of the top in the world. So the question is this, right? What's the most top search on Google in India today? Anand Nair from Google, can you share? Sunny Leon? Okay, that's great. That's actually a great point, right? Sunny Leon, right? Rudra? Is Google. But you say how to, or let's take a metaphor like how to. The last time is how to kiss a girl, right? That's one of the most searched terms on Google. And you can say how to get pregnant, how to not get pregnant, blah, 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 blah. So Sunny Leon killed it, right? That's it. And so why isn't Sunny Leon writing a book? And why aren't you partnering with her to write a book called The X Line with Sunny Leon?
You've just given me a wonderful idea.
I'll tell you the power.
This is why I came here, Alok. This is why I came here.
I love it. Let me give you the power of Sunny Leon, right? And this is going to embarrass my wife, but I'm going to still tell you. I posted a question on Facebook last week. Said, who is the Kim Kardashian of India? Right? I'm looking for a game. And I'll be honest, I'm looking for a Kim Kardashian inspiration. And everybody was saying all those usual suspects.
Yeah.
And my wife very innocently says, Alok, there's a girl called Sunny Leone. You should check her out. I said, dude, I've checked her out, but I don't think you need to check her out, man. Where did you get that name from? Do you know what she does? And she says, no, she's in the news all the time. She looks very good. She's probably Kim Kardashian. I said, no, looks are not what you see. Don't judge a book by the cover. But,
wrong.
So my point, Ashwin, is, you mentioned very innocuously, but you did, a company called News Hunt.
Yes.
How many people use News Hunt here? Phenomenal. Awesome. How many people have downloaded a book on News Hunt? Right. That business is looking like a real disruptor because it's giving people consumption, bite-sized, 1 rupee book, if I'm not mistaken.
Exactly.
And it's like that A.H. Wheeler
That's right.
You know, when I used to travel in my youth, I used to go from Bombay to Nagpur in a train, and there used to be this dhakel on the platform called A.H. Wheeler. And they used to sell all those pulpy books that never made sense. But you know,
Sansanati.
unfortunately, I had English as my first preference. But
And again, you know, since you mentioned A.H. Wheeler, take, for example, someone like Surendra Mohan Pathak. I mean, you know, before the Chetan Bhagats came along or before any of us came onto the scene, Surendra Mohan Pathak had already made a brilliant business model out of selling pulp. I mean, he has 2 series. One is known as the Sushil series, and one is known as the Sunil series.
sounds like that
200
sounds like that Bhabhi website that came and went, right? So
no,
let's not get there.
250 titles, and each of them probably selling anywhere upwards of 2 lakhs to 3 lakhs.
So question, Ashwin, is this, right?
Just through A.H. Wheeler.
So are you saying that, you know, let's take Shobha Day,
Yeah.
right? Old. Let's talk about her. The reason I brought her up is because, again, you refer to something which I really admire about her.
Yeah.
Shobha Day said in an interview, I write 5,000 words a day, come what may.
Yes.
New Year ho, party ho, Janmashtami ho, Ram Navami ho.
Right.
She writes 5,000 words a day.
Yes.
And I find that so easy to believe. I've written about 700 blogs.
Yes.
And say about 700 words. So I've written 15,000 words.
Yes.
And I can see that discipline becoming very inculcated. You know, you can inculcate it.
But that is a fact.
So why does she sell? Because of the stuff that she writes?
Yeah, you know, but also what's happening is that attitudes and preferences are now changing.
Sure.
So, for example, authors which used to regularly dominate the bestseller lists 8 years and 10 years ago, today you find that they come onto the bestseller lists for maybe about a couple of weeks, and then they go off the list equally quickly.
So let me rephrase the question. Would Shobha Day have had the same challenges you had?
I think she was probably one of the sort of innovators, as it were.
Yes.
Because at the time when she started out, there were very few people who were actually offering that brand of fiction. Right. But then what happened is that the model became very successful. And when the model became successful, suddenly there was a whole bunch of Me Toos who said, oh, you know, I could do this.
Right.
And that's precisely what happens in the world of writing.
So for many, many years, till I grew up, Haruki Murakami was someone I was fascinated by.
Right.
And I publicly said that he's the only man who.
And you know, you and I share one thing in common, by the way, that both of us have our favorite book as the autobiography of a yogi.
Awesome. That's awesome. That's beautiful. And so does Steve Jobs, right?
Yeah,
which you know.
absolutely.
So, quick question again. You know, now a Murakami, how many people have read a Murakami here? Some people have. Awesome, right? Arcane, exotic, really not there.
That's right.
Would it be a passion to write what you love? So the question is very direct. Does the marketability of content influence your writing, or does the writing influence the marketability?
You know, Alok, when I started writing the Rozabal line is a theological thriller. It's about, I had been to Srinagar. There's a tomb out there in Srinagar which dates back to 112 AD. There's a body in that tomb which is a north-south burial.
Nice.
And the interesting thing is that there is a second body beneath that first body. That first body is going back to the 14th century, a Muslim saint, Pir. He was a Pir, Nasiruddin. And then there's the second body which is unidentifiable, but it is not a north-south burial, it's an east-west burial below the first body. Wow. And they say that goes back to the origins of the tomb, which is 112 AD. And the common folklore around it is that Jesus Christ is that second body.
Awesome.
So I just found that story fascinating and I wrote it. When I started going to publishers, they said, are you nuts? I mean, if you're writing a thriller, we'll look for the next Dan Brown, we'll look for the next Sidney Sheldon, the next Stephen King. We don't need to look for the next Marwadi Banya businessman who wants to become a thriller writer. So we don't need Ashwin Sanghi for that. The point I'm making is, if I had written that book according to what was marketable, I would have done another Chetan Bhagat number. The point I'm trying to make is that when you are writing, at that time, take off your marketing hat. Write what you want to write. Once you have written, take off the writer's hat, because too many writers continue to wear that hat after the book is written, and they behave almost holier than thou, that, you know, oh, no, I don't care about the lists, I don't care about marketing. Quietly, they are actually itching to make that book sell. Awesome. Take off the author's hat, put on your marketing hat, and when you've got that marketing hat on, completely forget about the fact that you were an author and just concentrate on selling the book.
So, you know, let me share the last bit of trivia which will shock people here. You know, I've been a career salesman. मैं बेचू आदमी हूँ. That's my धंधा. सबको माल बेचता हूँ.
As long as you're बेचू and not बिकाऊ.
बेचू.
It's okay.
बेचू.
That's fine.
Now, for many years, you know, I used to sell contests, you know, digital, print, blah, blah, blah. Just कुछ भी बेच दो यार माल, ताकि अगले दिन का salary मिलेगा. There used to be this very thin, you know, chikna chupda guy, as we call him. You know, we have our code words in the salesgiri, who's who. Very nice guy. He used to speak so elegantly, and we used to keep pitching him content, right? And he used to never buy. Okay. But the bada you know, in Arvind Kejriwal's beep admi tha, right? If you saw what was going on yesterday. Then this man moved to IDBI. This was in DBB. Then he went to IDBI. वहीं पर भी यार इतना परेशान करता था, कुछ order ही नहीं देता था. And then he disappeared. Just disappeared. This man was not available. And we said, ठीक है यार, good riddance. कम से कम कोई check write करने वाला आएगा कम से कम. All of a sudden, we see a book in Crossword written by this man called Amish Tripathi. And this man is Amish Tripathi. And boom, 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 man, this guy is all over the place. And, you know, I buzzed him and I said, dude, what the shit were you doing? Were you not signing my check because you were writing while we were pitching? And he said something so innocent. He said, Alok, मैं त्रिपाठी हूँ भैया. मेरे grandfather told me these Shiva stories when I was growing up. Yeah. And one day, I didn't want to be the rat. And I said, यार जो दादाजी ने बताया वो लिख देता हूँ. And that's became the whole Meluha and whatever the serpent stories. Absolutely. And whatever else is written. So that was a completely different ball game of, you know,
see,
just
we all have stories inside us. We all have a story inside us, Alok. The challenge is not in terms of having a story inside you. The challenge is what do you do after that story has emerged.
Awesome. That's a great idea.
Because there are two challenges after that. One, how do you sell the story? And the second is, what do you do beyond that? Because that second story is not going to be within you. It's not as if you're a vending machine that one pops out and another one is inside you. That's the time when you really need to start thinking as a writer that what is going to be my next story.
Fantastic. Awesome. So we're opening up the house. Yeah, we heard the bell. We heard the bell. Like, you know, we're not cows over here, man. We get it. Chota sa bajaoge to chalega. Okay, yeah, shoot, Rudra. So Rudra is Rudrajit Desai, author, first book published, Rudra, many more to come?
I really can't say right now, so but yeah, first successfully
published. Entrepreneur, Sequoia funded, multiple talented man, also right now being promoted by Google,
right.
Play Store as the book on the homepage.
Lovely.
Yeah, sir. Lovely. But I was going to introduce myself in another way. A very average entrepreneur and a first-time author. Would it help if successful authors like you tweet or say something about books like, you know, for guys that written books like
it does help, undoubtedly. Actually, you know, there is that old muhavra which says ki boond boond se ghada bharta hai. That boond boond actually is quite a bit of a fact, that in terms of, you need to look at there are multiple opportunities like that. Whether it's in terms of can you get another author to endorse the book, can you get someone else to talk about it on social media, can you make sure that the book is a little more visible at certain places. But at the end of the day, you know, I think the formula in book marketing is that there isn't a formula. I mean, that is really what one needs to pick up from this.
What can I do to have you tweet about the book, actually?
You know, I have a price list, so I'll send it to you.
So I used to work for one of Alok's companies. And I've learned how to sell from him. So
sorry?
I used to work for one of Alok's companies, and I've learned how to be a bechu from him. Hence the question.
Good for you. I have always maintained that the best quality of an author who wants to sell his book is become shameless. If you cannot get rid of the sharam, you will never be able to sell.
I completely agree. Thank you.
So one, you know, also just on that note, right? What did Zuckerberg say on the 1st of January? He mentioned some weird book and everybody then started buying the book, right? Does anybody remember? So Zuckerman on his New Year, Mark Zuckerberg, what am I saying, Zuckerman, Mark Zuckerberg. Dude, I'm zoning out, man. Mark Zuckerberg has started a new, I think he had those 3 Patiala shots on 31st. और एक तारीख को जगकर बोलता है कि my resolution will be to read a book. And he started this book reading club.
Yeah.
So the first 10 days have vaulted some book that I had never heard of in my life before. So I think it's the universe, right? Some accidents will happen. Yeah. Hopefully, if you're in the path of that accident and it's a good accident, you're good for you, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, sure, shoot. How many more authors? How many people have written stuff here? Authors.
Lovely.
Awesome. What if, yeah, sure. The End of Power. Yeah, how many people have read The End of Power? Awesome. So Mark Zuckerberg was really informative in recommending a book that he never read. You should send him some of these links of yours, you know?
You know?
The peer and the... Usko bula le India mein wahan le ja.
I have a priority list always. There's a to-do list. Number 1 on that list is Sunny Leone.
I'm telling you, you should write a book with Sunny Leone. You fit that bill, man. You'll market it, you'll fit it. Breaking All Barriers by Sunny Leone. Right? Okay. Other questions? Yes, please. You can shout, man. This is the Rodinhoods. You got to shout to be heard.
Got one.
That's the first step of being an entrepreneur, man. You got to be in the bathroom and we got to hear you.
I'm young. I'm learning now.
Yeah.
Hi. My name is Mohit. I'm 22 and I just finished writing my book, which will be published by Harper sometime at the end of the year.
Wonderful.
Now, I'm 22 and I have 0 experience in marketing and very little in writing after my first book. What I want to ask is, at what point in your writing career can you pinpoint at one particular marketing strategy or promotional strategy that really, made that curve, best-selling curve, shoot straight up?
You know that the first book which I wrote, The Rosabal Line, it sold, when I started selling it as a self-published title, during that entire 1 year, I sold 900 copies. 900 copies is what I sold on Amazon. And I was one of actually the top performers in the self-published segment by selling 900. So it was pathetic. Then when I got published and the Rosabal Line came out in India, the first print run was 2,000. And then we kept printing 2,000 as orders started flowing in. We ended up with about, I think if I'm not mistaken, about roughly 20,000 or 25,000 books during the course of that year. So it wasn't some great, knock the ball out of the park type of bestseller. I think for me, it was the second book, Chanakya's Chant, which did the trick. And that book, I think the key was really in terms of getting a lot of people, the same critics who had been very positive. The Rosabal Line was a book which got a lot of critical acclaim, but it didn't sell really that well. And Chanakya's Chant was exactly the opposite. It ended up with a lot of criticism that, Ashwin Sanghi is just trying to be very commercial and he's trying too hard. And that was great visibility actually, because I had never received that sort of PR before. So actually that negative PR in some ways actually drove a lot of people to go and pick up the book because they heard of it. And I think with the Chanakya's Chant, we ended up crossing 100,000 copies within the first 6 months. And as a result of which the sales of the Rosabal Line also took off. Yes. So I think there is always that one magic moment, and very often it's not something that you have consciously done, and that's what I mean by that bloody good luck factor.
Awesome. One question here.
Yeah. Yes, please.
Okay. Your Chanakya Chant had shade of Indira Gandhi and little bit around it when I read. So does it picking up a controversial topic helps marketing a book as such?
I think controversy on its own cannot sustain sales. There are many books which have recently come out into the market which have some element of controversy attached to them. That could possibly be considered as one, in mathematics we talk about necessary and sufficient. You could possibly consider it as a necessary condition, but is it a sufficient condition? I don't know. At the end of the day, to my mind, there is still a lot of stuff that goes in to making a book really, really successful. A lot of authors don't necessarily talk about it, publishers don't necessarily talk about it, because they want you to believe that, oh, the book was so great that it just did brilliantly. but the sort of effort that goes on. Take, for example, an author who's already well established. You know, there are talks about what is the print run of a book. And there are people who ask me that why should you insist on a large print run? Yes. And my view in that is that, you know, we always talk about the economic theory of demand and supply. And we say that, well, demand is what results in supply going up because more people are demanding it, so supply will go up. But actually, it's the opposite in the bookstore. If there's enough supply, there will be demand. Nice. Because when you have 300 books out there loaded up right in the front, anyone walking in says, oh, that's an important book, I have to buy it. Awesome. So there is customer psychology involved, you know.
So let's conclude by some thoughts that I have. And I think, you know, I'm just being shameless here, right? I think the biggest tragedy in the book business is that there are no VCs getting involved here. So they're too rich, the richest two men in this room. How many, come on now, you got to answer, how many book entrepreneurs have you funded, man? And if you are guilty by charge, right? तो यार पैसे यहाँ से हैं, ये सब ट्रेडिशनल बिजनेस नहीं होता है, पैसे बनते हैं वीसी लोगों से, उनसे पैसे लो, बुक लिखो, सबको खुश करो, फिर वापस जाओ. Sales is equal to balance sheet now. If you understand Padta, now I'm redefining the Marwadi Padta, right? P&L is actually balance sheet and not the other way around. The second, but I think on a more serious note, you know, Ashwin, I fear, and this is a really big confession, my daughter is here, she's 18, and I don't think a lot of people are taking to reading because it's complicated. I'm just being very, I'm simplifying content. It's complicated. It requires commitment. You know, I very studiously bought Capital by Thomas Piketty. Okay, now let me tell you the record I have with that book. My wife very diligently bought it. She was very upset that I was asking her to buy a hard copy. She said, "Pakka Marwadi." She said, "Soft copy के लिए रुको." मैं कहा तब तक सब दुनिया पढ़ लेगी, मैं बेवकूफ़ बनूंगा. लेकर आओ अभी के अभी. 2,500 रुपए का बुक आ गया घर में. चलो भाई. पढ़ा. First page, second. Have you read Capital? Dude. Second page, third page, sleep material. 8:30 बजे सवेरे रात को पढ़ो तो टुन. You know, you're dead. I said, no man, you got to do it. You got to do it. Boom, boom, boom. At 24, I gave up. At page 24, gave up. I can't read
That's still more than 18, by the way.
And Amazon just published that the record for that book is page 16.
Incredible.
So I'm 50% better than the peers.
You know, the problem is, the real truth is that attention spans, human attention spans, have been progressively declining. Right. There was a very interesting study done which found that if you had looked at the human attention span in the year 2000, it was roughly 12 seconds.
Wow. Right.
If you looked at that same attention span in the year 2012, it was something in the order of 8 seconds.
That's right.
And what is really worrying, Alok, is the fact that a goldfish in that same year had an attention span of 9 seconds.
Awesome.
So in other words, we are doing about 1 second worse than a goldfish.
Yeah.
So the key I have always maintained with writing is how do you get someone to turn the page? The biggest quality of a writer. So for example, at least I'm one of those very few who works with an Excel spreadsheet. I have 3 columns, the chapter number, what happens in the chapter, and where does that chapter end? What is the incentive to turn the page?
Math.
Period.
So that's awesome. You know, I hope we've fired up a lot of imagination in this room for the authors. I'll end by something that I still confess. I haven't read Capital, but I'll confess on a bigger failure. So many years ago when I was still young, I bought Ulysses by James Joyce. How many people here have read Ulysses? First page. Anybody beyond 10 pages, 7 pages? So I was so ashamed of not being able to, I read the first page for sure. First page ko maine 12-13 baar padha hai. And then I bought a book on how to read Ulysses. And that book also I have not been able to read. So whenever someone reads Ulysses, please call me and I shall be your slave because I want to read that book before I die. But we will read your books for sure.
Thank you.
And mota moti boss, end of the day, जाकर माल खरीदो, नहीं तो कुछ फायदा नहीं होने वाला इस session का. Please buy and big hand for
I'm
Mr.
available
Sanghi.
on Flipkart. I'm available on Amazon. This is another commercial plugin.
Awesome. Awesome. Fantastic.
Thanks.
Well done. Thank you. Congratulations, Ashwin. You've just broken so many barriers in this room today, right? As you walk off the stage, it never happens at the first shot. It never happens the way you want. You don't have to be, you're a gaadi wala, yaar. Tu to gaadi bechta hai, hum to moza bechte hain, right? You become a book writer. You can do anything you want if you persevere. That's the takeaway. Awesome.
Thanks a lot, Ashwin and Alok. Quick confession, the reason I had to switch off the slide was the clicker was there. Alok was sitting on it.
I was sitting on it, man.
Yes. And
I'm hoarding the clicker.